As many Canadians are aware right now, Sun News Network is now officially gone. The most far-right television station that has ever existed in Canada is now officially gone, which is a part of Quebecor media. The Sun owns many newspapers throughout Canada, blah, blah, blah. I, for one, could not be any more happy that the appropriately coined Fox News North is gone. They were a very terrible institution. They were outright liars. They promoted some of the most disgusting racism, homophobia that this country has ever seen. They truly were the Fox News of Canada. And the entire country got to watch them go down because nobody was watching the program. Sun News itself blamed government regulation. It blamed government interference for its failure, when in fact the channel never made a profit because people didn't want to watch it. It had a very small core of right-wing kooks that liked the show. But it wasn't enough to sustain the television station. It wasn't, government regulation that brought them down. While they touted their free market garbage that people should be allowed to decide and there should be freedom of choice, what did they end up doing? They ended up applying to be a part of basic cable service. Basically, if you had any television service in the country, you would automatically have Sun News as a part of that. A lot like Fox News does, and then uses the fact that they're on a basic service to claim everybody watches them. Nothing could be so tremendously hypocritical to continually propound the free market in its purest, most classical form, but then turn around and demand to be on a forced service. And that was the only thing that actually would have saved the station. I mean, most of their operating costs were only about $30 million a year. Actually getting on to that basic pay service would have saved the institution. But it didn't get on, not because of some conspiracy against the right wing, as many people on the station claimed. It was not a part of some anti-freedom of speech movement, the only dissenting voice in Canada, as they so loudly proclaimed. It was because nobody watched it. And nobody watched it because it was a racist, homophobic, Islamophobic pile of a-holes. And now they claim to be controversially Canadian, which I thought was really funny because when you think Canada, you don't really think controversial. Of course, we've done plenty of controversial things, but it's not something that generally connects in your mind. Like that's something you think of when you think of Canada. And this organization claimed to be the only real dissenting voice in Canada, which just happened to land on the side of the police, the Harper government, and conservative hate-filled values. But apparently it's a dissenting voice. Because, I mean, they had an extremely small minority of people who actually watched it, but somehow they represented real Canadians, the real Canadians who apparently didn't watch them. That would be like me claiming to speak for the entire proletariat, which of course would be false. But let me get into more about what Sun News really was. They proclaimed that they were the only ones willing to stand up to Islam and its effects on Canada. But what do we mean when we say stand up to Islam? Basically what they did was slander it. They would constantly attack it. They would say hateful, prejudiced things, even going so far as to call Islam a death cult. Well, this is obviously untrue. But what is this really? When you can criticize Islam, but you can also be a tremendously prejudiced piece of garbage. When you discuss something that's a part of Islam that you don't like Sharia law, which rightfully should be criticized, that is one thing. To turn around and call all Muslims terrorists, or to call Islam a terrorist ideology, that is being prejudiced. So they go out and they call Islam a death cult, and then complain when people call them prejudiced. And then when you try to tell them to shut up or to correct them on it, they claim you don't support freedom of speech. I've seen my previous video, a couple of videos back, about free speech. But that's what it really was. They took extremist language and passed it off as freedom of speech. And if you disagreed with their racism, or their prejudice, their homophobia, or what have you, then you were therefore against freedom of speech. Because that's the difference. The difference between making a rightful criticism and being a prejudiced a-hole. Ezra Levant, the single most controversial personality on the entire network, went on an 8-minute rant, racist, terrible rant against Roma people, more commonly known, incorrectly known as gypsies. He called them all manner of nasty things. He called them crooks, swindlers, that their applications as refugees to come to Canada were false, and that they were lying, and that they were cheats, and they were organized crime. He said all manner of terribly horrible things. And then when he was finally called on it and investigated for hate speech, he acted like the victim. Like you were stifling freedom of speech. When you go out and you attack a race of people, not make a rightful criticism, when you attack and paint a whole race of people as being the same, then yes, you're being racist, you're being prejudiced. That would be the difference between rightful criticism and being an asshole. But Sun News Network didn't differentiate between these two things. To them, they were all part of the same lump of freedom of speech and fair criticism, that racism was considered to be fair and something they could do. And this extended into, all the other personalities. Menzoid, Di Bastino, Sue-Ann Levy, Menzoid, Brian Liley, all of them. Except that Ezra Levant was the biggest symbol of that. Michael Coren, who at one time was a really decent person on the radio, then joined Sun News Network, and apparently the weight holding down the crazy balloon disappeared. He went out and he even wrote a book proclaiming that, essentially straight up denying all the connections between Hitler and the Vatican. And just basically denied all of it. He went on these tremendous, terrible rants, like much like we saw with the previous sex education thing, that say sex education will begin as young as grade 4, which they then, in that same document, will say homosexuality as a legitimate sexual experience will be talked about. Somehow means to them they'll be talking to 4th graders about anal sex. No, it's just that sex education will begin as young as that. They'll start off with small things, important things, and then as they get older, they give them more information. But for somehow in their minds, that means instantly gay sex will be forced on grade 4 children. And he was one of the biggest, loudest voices about this. Apparently, it's just reactionaryism, to where they have to overinflate what's actually there to ridiculous proportions. And that's exactly what this whole network was about. The whole station was one gigantic right-wing rant. And it wasn't wrong because it was right-wing. It was wrong because it was ridiculous. It went to such absurd extremes, to things, the claiming that people supported things that they didn't, as the aforementioned sex education I just talked about. They were, I really believe that the on-air personalities were terrible human beings. They really were. And I don't really say that about a lot of people in the media. There's a lot of people at Fox News I would consider to be terrible human beings. But this whole station, their whole on-air personalities were just despicable human beings. Right from, Menzoid in the mornings, Brian Liley, Michael Coren, a double FU to Sue-Ann Levy, who I've had a couple of exchanges with, and a triple, quadruple, please burn in hell, Ezra Levant, one of the single worst human being that was ever on that station. And one thing that really bothered me was people who went to the meeting claimed that this was a sad day. I mean, they're actual direct competitors. This was a sad day for media, and that they felt sorry for these people being off the air. No, this was a good thing. It was a prejudiced, racist, hate-filled network. It is a good thing that they are gone. There is none of this liberal conception that all loss is somehow bad. That the death of, like the death of Hitler is somehow as equally as bad as a starving child. Not all, they're not all comparable. They're not all the same. They're all different. It is one thing for a small, kind of like Media Post going out of business and Sun News going out of post. Sun News was an objectively horrible thing. It was a racist, hate-filled, I've already said that a couple times now, organization. It is a good thing that it is gone. The Canadian people have spoken. The free market has spoken. But more the people of Canada than the free market itself. People didn't want to watch them because we are not like that. Well, Canadians aren't openly racist and hate-filled like that. We have a more passive-aggressive way of doing it. We're still the imperialist scum that the United States is. Just not to the... it's not as visually perceptible as it is in the United States. But we're still there. Maybe we're a lot nicer to homosexuals. We're pretty cool about the whole marijuana thing. But in the end, we are imperialist tyrants, just like the United States. We pass off the war crimes that we participate in on the U.S. Oh, well, it's not us that do the bombing. It's the U.S. that does. We're just following their lead. We're just peacekeeping, not policing like they do. And we are very much an intricate part of global oppression, part of the imperialist war machine. A much smaller cog in it, yes, but we are no less innocent of the crimes that imperialism commits. And the fact that Sun News went down is a good thing because they were the biggest cheerleaders of what is frankly genocide against the third world. It is a good thing that they are gone because those people were terrible human beings. If you like this video and you'd like to see more of them, then head over to my Patreon page and show your support. Or you can go to the MRN bookstore and check out some of the latest books available. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and share on various social media.